WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321.
Mike Miller of South Milwaukee is the Republican candidate for the 20th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Mike Miller, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for participating in our interview today. What is your campaign's key message and why are you running for this office?
Community first. That's the key message for the campaign. And, you know, I'm really looking to represent, obviously, the entire district. I've been living in South Milwaukee for the last 25 years, raised my family there, and I've spent most of my life in Milwaukee County.
So if elected, what's an example of a bill you would introduce and why?
You know, this kind of fast forwards to probably another question you're going to end up having in relation to how I would differentiate myself from my opponent. There is an existing bill out there, Assembly Bill 1205, revolving around recycling and recycling hazardous materials, specifically batteries. I come from that industry. I've worked with Representative Honadell in the past on making sure that that bill meets the needs and technologies of the day. And with a lot of technologies, developing and using portable power, there's a lot of exotic chemistries going on out there. That bill ended up getting stuck in committee and actually stopped in committee. I would look at picking that up and figuring out why that got stuck, because truly in the industry, some of these chemistries can be very volatile and hazardous to the environment. I would look at picking that bill up and seeing how we can get that unstuck in order to keep that hazardous waste material out of the waste stream and out of the environment.
If you're elected, you'd be entering the legislature during a biennial budget year. Wisconsin's projected to have more than a $3 billion surplus. What would be your priorities, two priorities for use of that budget surplus?
Well, first of all, yeah, I mean, we have to make sure that we're fiscally responsible, obviously. But with the same understanding that local governments, the state governments are realizing inflationary pressures no different than our household budgets, okay? So some of that needs to be re-examined and studied a little bit to figure out what we need to, where we need to give and where those funds need to be directed.
In your answer, you don't mention tax cuts, tax reform. Is that something? Is that a use of the surplus that would be a priority for you?
Again, there should be a give and take, and yes, absolutely, there should be tax refunded to the taxpayer if all those funds, you know, aren't necessary. I would venture to guess that there should be a happy medium, a little bit of give and take with that budget surplus.
You don't mention any priorities for spending. Is there any part of state government that you think should be prioritized for use of the surplus?
I don't want to get into the weeds just yet. Again, I'm coming from the private sector, and you know, I am a detailed person. I studied finance back in college, and you know, if elected and given that opportunity, I would roll up my sleeves and definitely take a look and dive deep into that budget and figure out exactly, you know, where those funds are needed or where they're not.
K-12 education is a priority issue for many Wisconsin voters. What is your campaign's top priority for K-12 education? Education
is one of the topics in my campaign. You know, this ties into some of the workforce development questions I'm sure you're going to ask me. But I hear from business owners over and over and over again that they're having a very difficult time filling open job positions, especially in the trades, in some of the skilled labor markets, especially that. Our high school system and our education system really should be making our students workforce ready, right, coming out of high school. One interesting statistic I saw recently at an economic forum that I attended, the labor participation rate for 16 to 24-year-olds has been on a gradual decline and is at the lowest level since the 1990s. This is a little bit concerning because these are our future, employees and future workers. So, how do we reverse that? How do we reverse that trend and make it more appealing for these younger individuals, this younger generation, to enter the workforce to supply the labor that our businesses need?
What does the future of higher education look like in Wisconsin? We're hearing a lot about our 4- and 2-year colleges as well as technical colleges. What should change there? What role should the legislature have?
Well, again, this should tie into the K through 12 education. An individual coming out of high school, again, should be job ready, should have some of the skills necessary for that first time job. If they want to excel in their career or the field of their choice, that's absolutely where the post-secondary education comes in. But in the same light, let's be realistic. Some of these expenses revolving around post-secondary education seem to have gotten out of control because you're hearing stories all the time from individuals and friends of my children where they've racked up a significant amount of debt, have had to drop out of school. And, I think that another avenue needs to be looked at in order to help an individual further that goal, right, in their career. And whether that's through work and attending school, so some additional flexibility in that post-secondary education to accommodate a working student, maybe that's what we need to explore a little bit more.
You talked a little bit about this in your answers, but what do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and how would you propose addressing it?
Again, I think there are some population trend issues that are causing this, and definitely there is a lot of reshoring that's going on, creating more jobs and more opportunities in North America, the United States, and specifically Wisconsin. So to address some of those workforce development, matching the skill set with the job. If we have to go in and retrain, that's what we need to do.
Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow the state's economy. These investments also provide an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
I wouldn't necessarily require it because, again, if we're able to bring and attract that skilled work set into the state, and they realize what a wonderful state Wisconsin is, there's a very high likelihood that individual and those workers will reside in Wisconsin. So as far as attracting people, yes, absolutely. We need to continue to attract people to Wisconsin and realize that we do have a wonderful state to live in.
Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, and it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, those misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this issue, and what do you think should be done about it?
I'm sure that there's some bad actors out there, but let's take a look at it. The largest single employer in the United States, as well as Wisconsin, are small businesses. And obviously, small businesses, there's a lot of challenge. I am a small business owner. I do have to go through a workman's comp audit on a regular basis. And, some of the challenges revolving around that is, again, a small business owner wears a lot of hats. I may be classified as administrative, but today I may be doing administrative work, but tomorrow I may be in the warehouse helping to build an order. The day after that, I may be filling in for a driver and delivering that product, okay? That may not be my main and primary duties, so there needs to be some flexibility in there to accommodate the small business. And let's face it, on top of that, there are checks and balances in place. And maybe some of those, checks and or balances aren't being exercised. So, the bad actors obviously need to be checked up on, and those that are on the correct path obviously know what they're doing and should be, looked at as a good actor.
Moving on to housing, affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some have proposed government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue that keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What's your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Is it rent control or building more rentals?
Again, I'd like to use a personal example on this. My daughter had recently graduated from UWM, is working on getting her feet underneath her. Obviously, she paid for college and got out of college relatively debt-free. But she has been living with us still, right, until she can afford to save up enough to find that housing unit that suits her needs. Similar to that, our niece recently moved up from Tennessee and has found a job up here, and again, is living with us until they can save up enough money. Now, this isn't an uncommon thing. My grandparents hosted a lot of family members back in the post-war era when housing, similar to now, was very, very tight, right? And so this ebbs and flows. There's, supply and demand. I would venture to guess that the market was definitely overbuilt in the 08-09 recession. So this
rent control?
Yeah, this may be a temporary issue. I don't think rent control is necessary. I think that the market will eventually get built out in order to stabilize or even lower rents.
Moving on to healthcare, medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services, and there was even a closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do as a legislator to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
Again, I think healthcare is one of the industries with the highest inflation rate currently. Something definitely needs to be looked at, and specifically on the insurance side of things. Let me use another personal example. My family, my wife and I, do not have traditional health care. We've chosen to use MediShare. Even when we explored being a middle-income family, the possibility of using the exchanges, the cost at the time was greater than our mortgage payment, right? So, I think there's probably some kind of disconnect. Now, personally, I recently, within the last 2 years, had a hip replacement. And under MediShare, I was able to go and negotiate that price. My wife's sister recently retired from the medical billing industry. And basically, in a nutshell, when we were looking at the bills and some of the codes, she would explain to us that a lot of these services and, medicines and that sort of thing would have been priced anywhere from 40 to 60% higher than what we were able to negotiate on our own and pay for cash.
Is there something the legislature could do about that?
I think more choice, more availability, and access to other programs. Let's face it, competition is the equalizing factor there.
Mental health care is a growing concern for many Wisconsinites and concern for state and county budgets. In your district, what are you hearing on this issue, and how would you address mental health care in Wisconsin?
I would have to start asking a little bit. I have not heard much in the way of any specific mental health care issues since I've been out campaigning since the beginning of June. But I'm willing to sit down and listen. My wife worked for Lutheran Social Services for a number of years after she graduated from college, and some of that work she did was not only with disabled and mentally challenged individuals, but she had some good insight on that. And yes, there is always a need, and obviously, as a government, we should be looking after and taking care of the most vulnerable people in our communities.
On abortion policy, how should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion? Do you have a position on whether there should be different limits and exceptions than what currently exist?
So, there's a lot of noise out there, from either side, from the far end of either side, okay? There is a ruling on the books from a court ruling that passed, that was heard and basically passed last fall, where abortion currently is legal up to 20 weeks. Now, it's not a perfect solution. Without getting the detailed bill in front of me and really, again, diving into it and reading it thoroughly.
Do you agree with the 20 weeks currently?
I think the 20 weeks it may be just a little bit long, and I think that the general population is probably more settled on within the first trimester. So that is something that, again, the two sides need to find a happy medium in the middle, which I believe can be done with a little bit of work.
Transportation. What are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these be addressed and for the state to keep on schedule with reconstruction of our aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
Sure. I'm hearing quite a bit about the 794 project, specifically the Home Bridge and the Lake Express. There's been some ideas floated out there that possibly taking the bridge down, which would increase traffic through the various communities. And, the 20th District has kind of become a little bit of a bedroom community for downtown and other suburbs. And so they really rely on that corridor, that Lake Express and Home Bridge, and in access to the 794. So I would have to say that maintenance and repair to that corridor is important as opposed to eliminating that.
The environment, PFAS and other water contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose addressing it?
I'd like to take a local example, right? I think the state needs to step up and pay attention to, the existing water quality issues. A local issue is South Milwaukee, which is in a new addition to the 20th District, has the Oak Creek watershed running through it, right? And so there has been, at least for the last 20 years, roughly every 5 years, a study is being done, which basically has explained the same thing that the previous study has done, but every succeeding 5 years, it has not improved. We have a mill pond there, which has been tested according to one of the reports and found with some hazardous materials in it, likely from runoff from the heavily industrial area. There is quite a bit of erosion and silt, to the point that a number of years ago we had a bad storm that caused a significant amount of damage to the high school property that is just to the south the watershed.
Does the state have a role there?
I believe the state definitely does have a role because the DNR conducts these surveys. I think that the state needs to step up, not only with the fact that there may be hazardous or are hazardous materials that are embedded in the mill pond area, but then the DNR, we need to restore the flow, the proper flow of that watershed. Because let's face it, there's been significant development upstream that has caused additional runoff. So, it all ends up in Lake Michigan, just outside of where South Milwaukee Water Utility brings in their water.
We're coming to the end of our interview. I have two more questions. How would
Yes.
you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
I'm in business. I always try and take a little bit of a different path and differentiate myself from any opponent that I may have. I think that my activity in the community speaks volumes. Over the years, I've not only participated on committees in the school district, within the region, I've participated in chambers of commerce, and in addition to that, I've been out there quite a bit, from hosting exchange students to sponsoring Little League teams. So I think my involvement really goes without saying.
Last question. If you're elected and you'd have a magic wand over the state capitol that could be used to resolve an issue in one way that brings people together, what would that issue be?
Well, first of all, I don't think any magic wand would exist. And secondly, I think I would rather give that to the residents of the 20th district, that magic wand. And from listening to the residents of the district, I think they would take that magic wand and they would want to see our elected officials work together. And I'm hearing quite a bit of that, to work together in order to get the people's work done. So that's what I would do if there were a magic wand. I would give it to the residents to let them wave it.
Well, thank you, Mike Miller of South Milwaukee, the Republican candidate in the 20th Assembly District. The election is November 5th. Mike Miller, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.